Steeler Fury. SteelerFury.com.
Hey everybody, this is the SteelerFury.com podcast. I'm subbing in for the regular host, Jeremy Kohlman, but he's with us, Jeremy, and Korey Karbowsky, our usual podcast crew. We spice things up a little bit for the pre-draft extravaganza. Kids, it's Christmas. It's like the best time of the year. And here at Steeler Fury, you know, we always have a week's worth of podcasts. We're going to talk about the state of the Steelers and what WTF is going on, and what their draft needs are. And then, as you know, we'll have a preview or a release of the B2B Directional State Team of Sleepers and Small Schoolers. That's going to debut in a couple of days, or maybe already debuted, depending on the order of the episodes when they eventually come out. But it's exciting. Don't miss it. You know, this always culminates with our mock Steelers draft war room, where we go through all of the Steelers' potential picks and debate back and forth with the players and which ones that we decide that we would like to pick amongst the three of us and try to reach some sort of a consensus, which is nearly impossible. But, you know, that's the fun in it. But this year, there's a little bit of a twist. We are part of a bigger 32 real person mock draft that's being broadcast this coming weekend. Or in this case, will be broadcast last weekend. I don't know. It's confusing. You know, when you record ahead of time, it's a little bit hard to say. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about our Steelers needs. In the next episode, we're going to actually build our Steelers board. And then there'll be 3 nights of live draft, and you'll have to find out what happens. So anyway, that's a long way of saying welcome aboard the pre-draft extravaganza. Hello to Jeremy and Korey. Jeremy, how you doing?
Doing good, Will. Doing good, Will. Like you said, this is, you know, Christmas for us. You know, it's in April. I'm just hoping we get more gifts from Santa than we do Krampus this year. So,
and Korey, you look a little bit like you're in a Tears for Fears video that was shot on a flip phone.
Yeah, it's kind of the intention. Our Steelers QB situation is kind of ghastly, so I kind of like this, you know, this little dark and
taking us back to the 90s. Yeah.
Could really cut the lights if I wanted it to be more realistic, but I don't know if that's good for production.
Yeah, I'm not sure. God, who would like to start? Should I spin a wheel? Would somebody like to explain to me what is going on with the Pittsburgh Steelers since the last time we did a podcast? Because it seems to be a little all over the place.
I don't know. How long do we have? Oh.
I know we've talked, by the way, Jeremy, I know we've talked about them operating like they changed direction like a giant oil tanker at sea. But it feels like now they're an oil tanker with no steering wheel. Yeah,
I mean, when you think that Mason Rudolph is going to bring more holiday magic, you know, since we're coining the phrase Christmas in April here. You know, I thought we figured out that was more of a lump of coal than an actual present. So, yeah, you know, the biggest need by far is who the hell are we actually going to have throw the ball? We've been talking about it ever since Big Ben retired, through the Kenny Pickett to maybe a year and a half, was it, that we stuck with Kenny Pickett? You know, Mason Rudolph coming in, the Russell Wilson, Justin Fields thing the past few years. I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting pretty damn tired talking about quarterbacks anymore. At least the ones that have been on the Steelers the past 2 or 3 years. But you know, we've talked about it a million times. It all starts and dies with the quarterback. Just kind of feels like we're sticking the rudder in the water and seeing where we go. You know, whether we're headed towards swampy waters, out in the middle of the frickin' ocean at this point. You know, we're still waiting on Aaron Rodgers, maybe put on his cap and be the skipper of this thing. So who the hell knows at this point? But quarterback. That is the number one need.
If Aaron Rodgers does become the Steelers quarterback, he needs to get one of those captain hats, you know, like with the little anchor in the front of the bill, you know.
Well, last year, you know, he showed up, you know, to a Jets camp in that whole like Con Air look with the white beater and everything. Maybe we can get him to show up in like a Captain Jack Sparrow or whatever. Because, I mean, his hair is long enough to pull off Jack Sparrow at this point.
Oh, my God.
Captain Jack Sparrow. Excuse me.
Korey, tell us a little bit about what, I don't know. Is like Mike Tomlin the one that's hanging on for Aaron Rodgers? It's just like the girlfriend has already told him she's not interested by not telling him she's interested. You're like, what is going on exactly?
That's my only assumption. I mean, I'm at least fortunate we didn't go and pay Sam Darnold a ton of money. That could have been bad. I mean, it's not like there were that many good options this year with where we landed in the draft and free agents, but that's all the more reason. Like, I would rather have a good chance of being horrible than a chance at 7 to 9 wins with Russell Wilson, because then at least we're not in purgatory. So, I mean, that's the optimistic way to look at it, is that hopefully we suck bad enough to get a high pick. But it just has to be that we're waiting for Rod. I mean, it would be ludicrous as an organization for us to have not gotten anyone with the situation we were in. So I can only assume that that's the plan.
Well, follow-up question, Corey. If they have Aaron Rodgers, do you think they'll be any better than never had a losing season type of a season? Because it's hard to believe that even with the state that Aaron Rodgers is in, I don't know.
I mean, I don't know what he's shooting himself up with nowadays, but unless it's something that we really haven't heard of, then I don't think it's going to be anything that'll turn him into the pilot of a 13 to 14 win team.
And Jeremy's the other thing is, okay, let's say Aaron Rodgers is secretly rebounded and he's going to be like himself from 2 years ago or 3 years ago or whatever, like the last time he actually looked decent on the field.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't fit at all with the Steelers. Like, he is not a quarterback who's like not going to throw in the middle and be risk averse and not call audibles at the line and like all the stuff that they've been fighting to have control over the offense. It doesn't seem like it's a very good fit for that. So, like, why so chasing and waiting on Aaron Rodgers?
Well, I think Tomlin just doesn't want to deal with the rookie quarterback thing. Like, he is proven time and again that he would rather have someone back there that's going to take care of the football, that's, supposed to make, the easy throws to keep the offense, the chains moving. I mean, let's face it, we're still in this whole, we want to be a time of possession type of offense, run the ball really well. At least with Rodgers, I feel like he probably thinks that, well, at least Rodgers, especially in the short game, can put the ball where it needs to go. Because like 2 years ago, when we were still trying to figure out whether Kenny Pickett could be the guy, there were so many games where we were like, holy shit, Kenny, he's wide open in the end zone. Where are you going with the football? Sorry, I'm not trying to yell into the microphone, but it was like multiple times with the Kenny Pickett thing. And then with Justin Fields, the next year, he couldn't get the ball off on time. He just wasn't a quick processor. So there were probably some throws he could have made, that he should have made that didn't. And then Russell Wilson was kind of the risk aversion guy over the middle. He like never throws over the middle. Loves the deep ball type of deal, which is the only reason I kind of wanted Russell Wilson to come back. At least he might throw a deep ball. But I just feel like they feel like Rodgers could be the guy that is the custodian of the offense. I think towards the end of the year with New York, he actually was decently effective. I'm not saying he was great by any means, but he was playing winning football down the end of the stretch. Now, whether they won games is a whole nother thing. That Jets team had a whole lot of issues last year. Injuries across the board, multiple offensive linemen missing, wide receivers dropping balls. But, as soon as Devontae Adams came to New York, all of a sudden it seemed like the offense started clicking like 3 or 4 weeks after he came there, just a little bit better. And the thing with Aaron Rodgers is at least he understands the timing of the play most of the time. Like, he knows it's time to get rid of the ball. He knows where to go with the ball. That I would say Rodgers would easily be the best cerebral quarterback that's been in Pittsburgh since Ben Roethlisberger, if you want to make that.
Well, that's a low bar, my friend.
Well, I know it is. I'm well aware, but I think Rodgers can, bring this team back to, the playoffs, assuming we, I don't want to go too much into our needs here because we're going to keep going down this road in this episode of the Steeler Fury draft extravaganza and all that, but assuming you can keep him upright, I think we can, at least never have a losing season again. I see 9-8 as the floor with a Rodgers that can move the ball, get out on time, and well, hey, you got to. The standard is a standard, man. We got to at least reach it. Maybe get to the playoffs, maybe win a playoff game. It's all the maybes with Aaron Rodgers. But I mean, even if we went with a rookie quarterback, the expectations go even lower. So, because
Well,
there's a guy getting thrown into the fire, and where we're drafting at 21, kind of alluding to what Korey said, we are in no man's land. We are taking, true project or kind of a Kenny Pickett type of guy. If we're talking about Jackson Dart, a real dart throw there.
you were
Sorry,
just
I had to
waiting for
mix
that
it in.
one.
Yeah, I had to mix that in. I'm a funny guy, but Jalen Milroe would just be a complete and total project. A guy that would not start week 1. I'd be shocked if he did, if he was able to do enough to do that. So, and then there's a multitude of other guys. Whether we're talking Tyler Shugg, who took 7 years in college to win 20 football games. And it's like, yeah, he's toolsy, but he's barely won in the years he's played. I understand there's been some freak injuries. There's Quinn Ewers, who 2 years ago looked like he was Superman, and now it looks like he's trying to just put a Walmart bag on the back of his back and calling that a Superman cape. There's just a lot of guys that have a lot of question marks. So sorry, I'll end my rant there and let someone else chime in here. But
I mean, Corey, the thing is, it can't, even if there were a quarterback to draft up for, or to move up for, because the thing is, if they sit at 21, it could be that, there was rumors today, Shedeur Sanders is going to fall to them at 21, but more
he's
likely.
visiting too.
But what's that?
He's visiting today.
Yeah,
Got
I know he's
confirmed.
visiting as well. But they've gone through the whole array of quarterbacks. I'm just saying, I guess I'm going to put this in the form of a question. It's like they traded away a 2nd-round pick for a wide receiver, right? Which at last year everybody was clamoring for them to to send a draft pick for a wide receiver. Well, now they've done it, but they now have this giant void in a draft full of, like, where the top talent is gone long before they get on the clock at 21, and then they're in this pool of, like, where they don't have another pick for like 100 picks. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but 70 or something, right? So I don't know. How do you you can't trade up for a quarterback. I know you just said you'd be satisfied to, like, have a quarterback and be, know you're going to have a bad season and get a good quarterback next year. What do you think they will do if they can't get Aaron Rodgers, for example? Is it Mason Rudolph?
Oh, I think it's probably like a Jackson Dart. I'd be for Milrow, honestly. I think it's if we don't get Rodgers, I think it's Milrow at 21, and we watch a train wreck of the first 5 or 6 games with Mason Rudolph, and then after that it's Jason Milrow. And I'm like, I'm usually a fan of these kinds of quarterbacks. I don't hate Jalen Milrow, but one, I don't think he's a first rounder, and two, the similarities to Justin Fields are pretty blinding. And if someone could tell me one thing that he brings that Justin Fields doesn't provide, and then you are already electing to move off, because the whole thing was like, oh, if Justin Fields plays well, we can just bring him back.
Mm-hmm.
Choosing not to, I don't get how then your solution is, oh, let's go get Justin Fields regen, who wasn't even as good in college. Justin Fields was, I think, a bit more accurate, airing it out. I kind of bounced around this idea to Will the other day, and works with Jalen Milrow too, is more tongue in cheek about Tommy Mellott from Montana State. But I'm at the point, let's just run the single wing or something. Let's just go to the 1940s, 1960s offenses where, if we're just going to run the ball, might as well just run it behind another blocker and not even this time with this throwing the ball stuff. Because if your best options this deep in the offseason, realistic options, are Aaron Rodgers, Jackson Dart, and Jalen Milrow, one, you really screwed up your offseason. And two, I just don't have an answer on how you put out an effective offense with that the following year.
I mean, they couldn't even put out an effective offense with a quarterback that actually can quarterback. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're already challenged because of what they're trying to do. And I mean, I tend to be, rely a little bit more on analytics and things than the average football fan does. And I understand that Mike Tomlin, if he were sitting here, would tell me that, he looks in the eyes of the guy and he can tell you if they can play and make the play. It doesn't matter what the computer spits out. That's the line that coaches like to say. But there was a lot of talk this offseason, particularly about how the Steelers' style of football, their concept of playing it very conservatively and trying to win with not turning the ball over and playing good defense, and about how that has stopped correlating with winning in the NFL, to the point where it's now almost counter to winning because EPA, in other words, the how effective you are on offense per play, is better than the other team's offenses against your defense, of course, but basically how good your offense is per play is the number one indicator of winning in the NFL. So you right away they have an offense that's not designed to be effective every play. It's designed to stay on the field, turn it into third and short, try to possess the football, grind your way down the field. It's not really about challenging offense. So right away, like I said, bringing Aaron Rodgers in, wild to me. Bringing in a rookie quarterback and expecting them to fit into that system and learn. Like it's one thing if they come in, like if you got Cam Ward right now and you added Cam Ward to this offense, he's a transcendent player. He can overcome even the limited and idiotic offensive plan because he, more like the way Ben did. It's like you follow the plan, and then when you need to make a play, you make a play. But if you don't have that in your bag, if you're Jalen Milroe, the only thing he's going to have in his bag to make plays when he can't figure out how to make it work is to run the football. He's very good at it. I mean, I would go as far as to say he's a better runner than Justin Fields was, right? And the arm accuracy is worse than Fields, but the velocity is similar. So I can see why they might, they're like, they're like a middle-aged man dumping the wife and signing up for a mistress that looks and acts exactly like the wife did. That sort of feels like where they're at.
Yeah, both of you made some good points, and I'll build on this. Since we've been talking about Jalen Milroe, he could have a year very much like Lamar Jackson's rookie year, where it's like you draft him at 30. I think the Ravens traded back up to 32 to get back in the first round to get that fifth year option, and then it's not like he started right away, but then like Korey said, if we go in with Rudolph and go guns blazing and we suck, it's just apathetic football. It's impossible to watch. You're basically going to turn this into a very similar to Lamar Jackson's rookie year, where you're going to throw Jalen Milroe in. You're going to say, well, you're going to learn on the job no matter what, through the good, the bad, the ugly. We're going to get you out there. We're going to have you playing against NFL people. I mean, not that he hasn't been doing that at Alabama and in the SEC. I mean, it's, he knows that type of speed on a week in, week out basis, but just how fast the game goes. But if that's the case, you're basically saying the hell with this year, which, to Will's point is, why do you trade your second rounder for a wide receiver if you're going to just waste a year of
I don't think they're looking to waste a year, man.
No, they definitely aren't. I mean, definitely aren't. But it's like that's kind of the parallel I see is like Jalen Milroe is just going to get thrown out there to the wolves, and he'll have some success. He'll run the ball a lot, and people be like, "Ooh, look at Jalen, he can run." Big fucking deal. Sorry,
superstar.
I was really trying not to drop
Korey,
an F-bomb there, but
Korey, indulge my fantasy for a second. If I know that on this show we're not particularly like in favor of running back in the first round. That feels like a guy's got to be so elite, and your team has to be more or less ready at every other position for that to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But if Justin Jalen Milroe were a same exact athlete, played in college, but he decided before he came into the draft that he was going to convert to running back, would you not be all over that guy as a first or second rounder? Of course you would.
He's that kind of talent at running back.
So I mean, right now they don't have a number. I mean, they have Jaylen Warren, who's part of it. He's been part of a combination, but never really been the number one guy. So what if this is all about, going a little bit outside the box and, signing Milroe and giving him some chance to play quarterback or have the ball in his hands and wildcat and do stuff with it, but to ultimately come in as a runner, and that still puts you in a position to draft a quarterback next year. Like, would they do something that wild?
I almost think that they would be more forward if they were. The one thing to consider here is that Tomlin does gush all over Lamar. Like there is a chance where he sees Lamar and Jalen Milroe.
Sure.
I was a big Lamar fan that year. I like Milroe's tools, but I think even back then, I think Lamar's touch was just. I that's why I believed in him as a quarterback when there was receiver talk. I think he had really good touch. I bought into the touch working on an NFL field, and
Yeah.
I think that's my issue with Milrose. You see a lot of these dudes with hoses come into the league who can't process. Now, maybe there's a world where he can extend and, he's kind of like a souped up Justin Fields, which is fine, I guess. But I'm inclined to believe that Tomlin's looking for Lamar 2.0 here. I just with how he talks about Lamar, I feel like he's kind of like broadcasting it.
Well, he's been saying for like, 5 or 6 years now about his idea of what young quarterbacks need to be mobile, and they need to be able to use their legs to overcome their period of learning the league, and describes that, what Lamar brings. And when he talks about opponents that play like that, he's totally about that. So yeah, that's why a month ago, I went on the same show that's going to host the draft this weekend that we're on. And I when asked to pick for the Steelers in a 3-round mock draft, I picked Jalen Milroe at 21, and I said, there was like a lot of consternation about picking Jalen Milroe there because that was a new concept at the time. And I said, well, you tell me after Mike Tomlin goes to the Alabama Pro Day next week and they have dinner with Milroe and they gush all over him, and Mike Tomlin talks again about the kind of quarterback that he likes, and then let's revisit this. So here we are a month later. And now it feels to me inevitable, really. I mean, I feel like the only reason they wouldn't pick Milroe at 21 at this point is if he doesn't make it to 21 or if they trade up to get him. I would say I feel like you could, I don't know about betting the house, but I would feel like it's about 90% right now. So for better or worse, we're probably going to have to end up dealing with it. Newsflash to those of you listening to the Steelers Forever podcast, we are probably not drafting Jalen Milroe in this exercise this weekend at pick number 21. But
just to say one thing too, I would have been all over drafting Jalen Milroe when we drafted Kenny Pickett. Like if this was a different time where we're coming off Ben, I would be a lot more willing to gamble on a guy like him, where it's like he might be horrible, but like we're at the point where like we're investing a second first rounder into a quarterback, and if we are ever going to bear the fruits of having TJ Watt and Cam Hayward be all pro still on our team, you really only got like 2-3 years to do it.
right.
Or you have to retool.
Korey, the thing is, it's the opportunity cost. If teams often drafted a guy in the first round at number 21 and then decided in a year that, there were good things about him that they thought were good, but he's not really going to develop into the guy they wanted him to develop in, and then they would draft a quarterback the next year at, pick number 5 or 6. Like, if you told me that they were committed to pick, if the best player available on their board next year at the time that they came around on the clock was a quarterback, or they were within range of an elite quarterback next year, that they would pick one, even though they drafted Jalen Milroe this year, I wouldn't mind drafting Jalen Milroe. That's it. It's a lottery ticket that's probably not going to pay off, but it's better than not having a lottery ticket in a way. I just don't think they're, those vets, that ship has sailed. They are not winning a Super Bowl with TJ Watt and Cameron Hayward. Like that's such a remote possibility right now that even if they got, young Aaron Rodgers, I feel like they're still so far away in so many respects. They gave up, lest anybody forget, Jeremy, a 300-yard rushing day at the last time they were on the field, and that's with everybody on the field and healthy. And even having, TJ Watt is an incredible player, didn't really, and Cameron Hayward playing very high level during that game didn't seem to help matters on the defense. So I'll give you the last word, and then we'll move on to some other needs.
Okay. I will say this. I think Rodgers is a win-win. If he comes in and plays well, fantastic. We look good. Awesome. If we suck, I hope he totally plays like Agent of Chaos role and is like blowing up shit, on the South Side, like just lighting fires, like making sure change has to happen. It's like the Joker, at the end of like the Dark Knight. He's just like pushing the button but until the building finally blows up at the end before he takes off on the school bus or whatever. It's like that, like that's my dream scenario right now. If change were to happen, because we're bad, I think Rodgers would exacerbate it so much more just because that has been his personality. He's had no problem throwing teammates under the bus in the past. He has no problem saying this offense sucks. I'm going to do it my way. That would be like the perfect recipe to like maybe finally get rid of a lot of the, Arthur Smith, some of the offensive coaches, maybe a damning thing, maybe we actually decide to expand our coaching staff. I know it's a novel idea, but, Steelers have the smallest coaching staff in the league by far. I think it's by like 6 or 7 coaches, so it's, I think Rodgers is a win-win just in that aspect. But other thing I wanted to float out there was, and I think we said in our text group today or maybe yesterday, with the guys that they have brought in for visits so far, there have just been a dearth of like true second round prospects. And maybe I think it was you, Will, that I feel like there's a trade in place already. There's like a silent handshake agreement, I think, with like Buffalo or the Chiefs to move down to 31 and 32, still keep that 5th-year option for Jalen Milroe, but then pick up that second pick that the Bills have in the second round, or maybe the top pick or the top pick in the 3rd round, or that late 2nd round pick from the Chiefs.
Yeah, except for you got the Giants, Cleveland, and New Orleans, who are all looking at add a quarterback, and they're if they draft somebody else at the top of the draft, they're going to be looking at to trade back in. You might end up trading down and trading your way out of a quarterback pick, and they seem very unprepared if that happens because they haven't had any of for example, the defensive line. The first round, late first round, early second round defensive line candidates. Not one of them has visited with them. They haven't been connected with any. As far as I know, they haven't gone to any pro days of them. Very weird.
Yeah, no, that's fair or whatever, but it was just kind of a thought, with both of those teams having extra picks, essentially second round picks, and that's probably the only thing we'd ask for too. Come up 10, give us your second. Back off, we'll call it a day. As far as what the trade compensation would be. And the other thing is like the Bills and the Chiefs are at the top of the AFC. The Bills were just a handful of plays from being in the Super Bowl. Those are probably 2 teams that think, well, we're going to be in the AFC Championship. We may only be one really good player away that can come in and contribute in year 1. So again, it's just pure speculation. It's be kind of a dream scenario if the Steelers are so sold on Milroe that that's who they want to be their first round pick. Like, I'm just praying and hoping that we'd be able to move back a little bit and just pick up some extra, even if it's like moving down 5 picks and picking up a 3rd or something. Like, we have got to grab that extra day 2 pick. But we're about to dive into some other needs, and we need those picks to address those other needs. Okay.
Yeah, it's like they're accumulating quite a few picks for next year. It looks like with some extra comp picks the way they played this offseason, which is great, but that doesn't help you this season. So if if their goal is to actually try to win while TJ Watt and Cam Hayward are in town, then you would think they would have allocated their resources a little differently this offseason. I think that summarizes what we've said so far. Korey, let's move on for a second. And I'm going to ask, I'll ask you the question this way. If the Howie Roseman, the Philadelphia general manager, took over the job today, and he looked at this roster, what would he be drafting at pick 21? Like, what's the biggest need for a team that doesn't necessarily draft just to try to win right now, but to try to build a team?
It's definitely, I would say, a tackle or a D tackle. And my bet would be one of those D tackles fall, and he would have that card in by the time the commissioner's done announcing the pick prior. Like,
Well, that would fit really well. We like to sprint to the podium anyway. Corey, keep going, bud.
I would say, I could see Derek Harmon being like a guy like that. Shamar Stewart, I could see. It's just, or even tackle. Tackles are weird because not a ton of these, like, one, I don't know if we can develop any of these guys, being frank with our line coach. We don't have, I don't know why I'm blanking on his name, the legendary Stoutland.
Well, he's that forgettable. So
we don't have Jeff Stoutland like the Eagles do to turn water into wine with whoever we take.
By the way, if I took over a team, that would be like one of the very first hires that I would make was I would, the Steelers coordinators are terrible, but their offensive line coach, I'd be hiring, I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm the Pittsburgh freaking Steelers. I can pay, I got money. I got prestige. It's a prestigious job. Like, I could have anybody. Why do they have the crappiest offensive line coach in the league? It makes no sense, especially after the way things have gone the last few years. Now we're going to make changes, and there's going to be real change. But whatever. Sorry.
I think when you hire bad OCs who can't evaluate, I think they therefore hire bad assistants, and it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. How often do you see really good assistants with bad OCs?
Yeah.
All the good assistants are from good coaching trees. Like, no one's hiring. When's the last Browns assistant coach that's been hired? When's the last Steelers assistant coach that's been hired? And I get Tomlin has the prestige, but if you're
the kid that played quarterback for Pitt, that was Cleveland's offensive coordinator and went to New England, but
yeah,
I can't remember his name right now. It'll come to me. Anyway, what I'm saying is, yeah, it's like he was not the greatest offensive coordinator, but he kept getting hired. He was one of those cats. Anyway, he had good assistants. That's what made him successful, is that he had good assistants. So you could win that way too if you're not a great assistant, but you hire well.
Yeah, I think he definitely sees a hole at tackle somewhere. I think if it's Howie, there's no way he's counting on Broderick this year with what's been on film, which would be fair. And then same thing, I think there's, you see the writing on the wall. Cam Hayward can't play for forever, and Benton didn't give you what you needed last year. It has to be one of those two. Someone will be there. It would be whoever that guy is. That's how they operate. And they actually, in general, they pretty much go, the public boards are pretty, they'll pick whoever slips from the public board. They're not like this team that goes kind of way off the rails too often. So
Alex Van Pelt, by the way, that was the guy I was trying to think of.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. I already said, when you said that, I was like, boy, I have no clue who you're talking about.
Yeah, Alex Van Pelt's playing career was probably like before you guys were born. So you were still in the womb, I think, Jer. So,
okay.
But I guess, to me, I feel like the best formula for the Steelers, if they want to play the style of football that their head coach, who seems entrenched, wants to play, then it's a no-brainer that you have to build offensive and defensive line. So that's what makes me feel like drafting a quarterback this year at 21, simply because you mismanaged your offseason getting a quarterback, is you're making a long-term mistake there. You could, unless you hit it big with a quarterback, you've got somebody that you would have picked at first overall, but the rest of the league doesn't get it, and he fell to you at 21. Like sort of a David DeCastro situation back in the day. Then, okay, like Patrick Mahomes had fallen, that was the word. The word was that Patrick Mahomes had fallen past where Kansas City traded up to get him. Like 1 or 2 picks, I think the Steelers had a deal in place that they were going to trade up even with Ben Roethlisberger. So I guess if that kind of thing, miracle happened with Cam Ward or something, they would do it. But I feel like if you invest in offensive and defensive line heavily, with their first couple of picks this year, and that's a pun that I didn't intend, then it gives you you're in such a better position when you're drafting a quarterback next year, because then that rookie quarterback is coming into a situation where he's got something around him. Right now, offensive line is scary. Their left tackle is a left tackle that, yeah, in college it was projected that he'd be a good NFL left tackle, but he's never really, even in the short period of time in the preseason, hasn't looked very good at left tackle. He didn't look very good at right tackle at times. And now we're going to bank our whole season, a Super Bowl contending season, because we want Cam Hayward and TJ Watt to make it to the Super Bowl. And Aaron Rodgers, we're going to bank all of that on a left tackle that we're not sure can play. So I feel like if I were to answer the question that I asked you, Korey, I feel like I'm drafting, somebody that I know can play either, both either left tackle or left and right tackle swing, who's good at both. I'm adding that to the mix within the first 100 picks, because they just don't have that guy on the roster. If Broderick Jones doesn't work out, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. Fatano would be an excellent left tackle, and they're going to send Broderick Jones back to right tackle where he wasn't very good, right? So I feel like you got to have some competition for those roles. And the defensive line, Cam Hayward played great last year for an old guy especially, and won All-Pro honors deservedly. But yeah, Keanu Benton is very good at what he does, but he's not necessarily a guy that works for every situation and against every team. And you tell me who the third guy is.
We have zero clue if Fatanu is going to be good. Zero.
Yeah, I mean, he was a great
Yeah.
left tackle in college, and he
But we-
does seem to be a fit. Like, compared to some of the other guys, he fits the offense better. So, like, I like that pick. In a vacuum, we don't know. As you said, he hasn't been on the field for a single snap.
Oh yeah, no, I'm with you. I was a fan of the pick. It's just like Broderick. We have a lot more film on Broderick in the NFL, so at the minimum, we know what he is. Fatanu could come out. There's a chance there's just a strength overload. Like there's just a strength mismatch, and he's on skates every play because he's, not a massive frame like some guys out there. Not saying it will happen, but there's a world where we don't invest in a tackle, and neither of our tackles can play.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it sounds like we're all in agreement that offensive tackle is still a need, despite the fact that we spent, it's 2 years in a row with the first round left tackle. So
Great development, great.
Yeah.
I honestly, I'd more pin the blame on development than anything.
well, of course.
Broderick was not a finished product coming in. I'm putting the O-line coach. Jeremy, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to just I agree with you on the whole development thing. I mean, it's not like we haven't taken talented players. Like we traded up 4 picks for Broderick Jones, who's probably one of the most athletic tackles the Steelers have drafted, since I've watched the Steelers in 2 decades. He's probably easily one of the best just flat out movers. I'm not saying he's perfect by any means, because he's definitely not. But at some point, and I understand you're saying, you don't want to pin everything on Broderick being our left tackle this year and not have a backup plan, but we at least do need to see him, for at least half a season at left tackle to figure out whether he's worth it or not. Because honestly, I could see a scenario where, we're sitting in the draft and I don't know, maybe Kelvin Banks, Josh Simmons are guys there, at pick 21. They easily could. I'm not saying they will, but we could be sitting there thinking, man, it's really hard to pass on this tackle. Let's take him. It wouldn't shock me if Broderick comes into the office the next day and says, screw you guys, I want out of Pittsburgh. You haven't, I've been playing out of position at right tackle. I'm a left tackle. He's been adamant about that. He's been saying, well, I'm playing right tackle. Eventually I will play left tackle. And then if we go out there and draft a rookie left tackle to potentially battle with him to start, I could see Broderick just kind of being the guy at this point that says, screw it, I need to change the scenery. It's not going to work out here.
Well, I'd like to know why they didn't just move Broderick to left tackle at some point last year and say, yeah, we're we're gonna risk Dan Moore not being as good at right tackle, but it's like we need to find out about Brad. If you thought you were going to let Dan Moore go, which I think they knew from the jump last year, then why not at least put Broderick over there at some for a game or two just to see what because they had to preserve their precious didn't have a losing season apparently.
Well, I mean, and on top of that, I mean, Will, I don't know if you knew this, but Dan Moore signed a really big contract in free agency. I think it's very reflective of the value he brings to a football team. So
it's just there's no tackles, of course. Anyway, hey Korey, I'm gonna screen share and throw this roster up because you guys can see that now, yeah.
Yeah, I can see that pretty
Not
well.
too dramatic. I mean, it could be worse.
I mean, they did in free agency. They did, add some pieces as you can see from the chart. They added Darius Slay. They added Brandon Eccles to be like a worst case scenario fallback at the nickel corner.
Guaranteed he starts week 3.
Who starts week 3?
Brandon Eccles. You said worst case, horrible scenario. I guarantee you he's starting week 3.
Well, only if they don't add somebody in the draft, because I feel like they could. But Darius Slay, you guys have a take on whether Darius Slay has as much left in the tank as, say, Joe Hayden did when he came to the Steelers, or do you feel like it's more like it's a curtain call for a year or two with Darius Slay?
What Joe Hayden give us? About 4 years?
Yeah, about 3 pretty good years, I think. And then, the last year was a fall off, but
whatever Hayden gave us, take 1 year off that, and I think it's about the same for Slay. I think he's about 1 year past, but
I will say I don't think it'll be as bad as like that experiment was with Patrick Peterson.
No.
Like Peterson was done.
Yeah. By the way, Joe Hayden, 5 years in Pittsburgh, so 4 good
5 years. Okay.
I would say 3 good years and 3 good years from Slay is what we get.
But we're still. I mean, do we still perceive that outside corner is an issue, like a need for the draft? Because it feels
not
like
so much anymore.
Behind the 2 starters, they have a guy that has made it through a full season, not being injured in like 5 or 6 years, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't really know what else they brought James Pierre back to compete for a special teams job, but do they even have anybody else at corner?
This screams use a 4th or 5th rounder in my eyes. This is that range where it's like take a guy where he might be good in 2 years, but they don't have it.
The only thing I find curious about it is, again, with just the people who we've brought in for official 30 visits, we have easily brought in 2 second-round corners, maybe first-rounder for Azaria Thomas from Florida State. But then we've also brought in, or will be bringing in, Trey Amos, who is, I think, very solidified as like a second-round corner. So it's not like they haven't looked at outside corners. So I agree with you. I think we can wait longer. It's not as dire of a need, but it's not like they haven't looked at some guys that could develop into pretty good outside corners.
I mean, but you look at that nickel situation, it's like, man, what they really need is a young, inside a corner that's capable of playing both inside and out, which is a unique skill set. But if you bring that guy in and you let him be the number 3 on the field or at times 4, then you can bring him along a little bit. Whereas, like at some point you have this older corner, he might get injured, he might get dinged up, right? Because it's more likely to happen after you hit a certain age. So I feel like right now, if I'm counting on Corey Trice to start games for this franchise, that is a wish and a prayer wrapped up into one. I like Corey Trice and all, but I mean that feels like very risky. So to me, we don't have to talk about specific names tonight, but somebody who is who plays right now, let's say on the outside, but has that physical demeanor. Like to me, for a nickel corner, the big difference is that you have to be a lot more physical. Azaria Thomas, aside from the fact that he ran 4.65 or whatever he ran at his pro day,
the 4.56, yeah.
No, he ran 4.6, I think, straight.
No, I thought I saw 4.56, but okay.
Yeah. So at any rate, because but there was talk about like what's the last corner that ran that slow, and
Yeah.
made it in the league. And there's only been a couple of names in like 20 years. But he is not a physical player, though. He's not somebody you're going to put in the slot and is going to tackle in the run game and is going to blitz and is, play against tight ends and whatever. So to me, you have to be a sort of a special dude. You don't have to be big, but you got to play with some ferocity and physicality that not all outside corners have, especially in today's college football game. These corners are getting thinner, and they're better running and better against these sort of more spread out offensive attacks, but they're not necessarily built for that physical style play. So to me, it's like I'd much rather see somebody who isn't a first or second round outside corner, but is pretty good outside corner who's going to be very good in the slot. That to me is like, if I had to specify the need, that's what I would say. But like I said, if you're going to go by the visits that they've taken and the interest that they have, it doesn't seem like they're interested in that either. So maybe they just love Brandon Eccles so much.
Just what would your thoughts be on like an Xavier Watts to just go full time down in the slot? Do you guys think he could handle his water at all on an island, or no?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I've watched, because I'm in Indiana. I just happen to be in an area where Notre Dame football's on a lot, and I see him as I don't really see him as a slot guy. Like he's good. Don't get me wrong, but I see him more as like of a soldier of opportunity rather than the guy that I'm going to put down in the trench. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like he's got a nice skill set, but it's
Yeah.
to me it's more suited to be further away from the line of scrimmage. I think I liked him better when he was playing split safety or as a sort of a alley safety in dime. I thought that seemed better to me. Yeah, I have an update. Yeah, 4.6 is the updated time. That's the official time for
Yikes.
Derek Thomas.
Wow.
Yeah, right. That's a little frightening.
You love it when your linebackers can outrun well, maybe not our linebackers, but when linebackers can outrun your corner.
Yeah, that's just not a good look. And like I said, because he doesn't have some of the other attributes in terms of physicality, he's pretty dependent on being able to run with guys and change. His change of direction is great. He's very good cover corner, but yeah, that sort of puts some limitations on you when it's not like Joey Porter Jr. runs a 4.3 either, right? So if you had a guy on the other side, it's like, oh yeah, I can take your burners and you can have the more physical guys, but he doesn't really fit with that. But we're showing our hand ahead of time. Aside from this question is at corner, I'm going to say if I had to guess the next big need, it'd be running back. As mentioned earlier, it does feel like I love Kenny Gainwell, and I like Kenny Gainwell as a potential third down guy, or he's the guy you trot out there in the 2-minute drill, or when you're behind 2 touchdowns or whatever. I think that's an excellent pickup for that. Plus, he was not only a high school quarterback. You may remember in one of my directional state teams, I showed some video of him playing quarterback in high school, and he was kind of awesome. I know it's like we could if we can't get Tyler Warren to come in and play quarterback, maybe we can get Kenny Gainwell to play some. But it feels like they're missing both those guys, both Jalen Warren rather, and Gainwell are not the biggest guys. They're not necessarily the guys that in a 4-minute drill I want to hand the ball to and pick up the 2 or 3 tough yards. I don't feel like that's really their game, and I don't know. I'll ask it in the form of a question. Jeremy, do you think that Jalen Warren is a good choice to be a number one? Could he carry a team?
I don't think he could carry a team. I think he could be more than effective enough. But carry a team.
I mean, is he better off being a change of pace second guy? Is really the question, I guess.
I mean, honestly, with the way that today's NFL is, almost everyone, doesn't handle a full workload anymore unless your name is Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley. Unless you are a truly special back, it's not like, well, unless your name is Najee Harris for the first 3 years of your career and we just pound the rock because we want to. It's going to be more of a 65-35 load. I mean, shit, we threw Cordero Patterson in last year, and that guy sucked. I mean, he was horrible last year. I don't know why he's even on the roster anymore, but, we've brought in 6 running backs for official 30 visits. We are definitely taking one somewhere. The list is DJ Giddens, Dylan Sampson, Bayshal Tootin, Ollie Gordon, Jaden Blue, and then Caleb Johnson, which hasn't been confirmed, but let's face it, he wears black and gold. They're going to try to bring him in for a visit anyway. So
I'm not a good, I think, unless you, were you?
No,
were
go
you,
ahead, Corey.
To me, this is a really easy question to answer. If you have a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson, you are not drafting a running back if you have Jaylen Warren. He will be more than enough for what you need to do. If you are attempting to be a team that wants to rely on the run game and wants that to be the focal point of the offense, and you're going to run on first down no matter what and all this stuff, then I don't think Warren's good enough to handle that. So it depends. He's good enough to be a number one, and like a true number one. I think he's going to be a true number one on a modern, effective, good quarterback offense. But that's not what the Steelers have at all. It's the opposite. So it's like, if that's the route you want to go down, then yeah, I think you got to get something else, even if that may or may not be the right path. If that's what you want to go down, then no, he's not good enough.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you're talking about him being good in a rotation where it's sort of a 60-40 split or whatever. That's not even, Tomlin doesn't even done that his entire career, no matter who he's had on the roster, So
I will.
the one time
I will say
the one time he did it was the one time he did it was the most effective running back year and one of the best offensive years they had in the last 15, which was when Lev Bell held out, and they used James Conner and the guy that sort of flamed out after a couple of years, but he had one good season, Jalen something. At any rate, so yeah, it did it once out of sheer necessity, but I just have this feeling that they're gonna add somebody to that mix that may end up getting the bulk of the carries rather than just some of it. But
Well, I mean, we've mentioned it before. This is easily one of the deepest, most talented running back classes that we've seen, honestly, since I think it's like 2007, 2008. Like, that's a year where you found like almost 10 Pro Bowl running backs in that draft class alone. It was something crazy like that. So, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if any of these guys come in and say, no, I'm just better than what's here, and you're going to give me the ball.
yeah,
I would have felt really good about our running back situation if we didn't sign Gainwell. And I like Gainwell. But if we didn't sign Gainwell, we cut Patterson. We rolled into the draft with just Jaylen Warren. We draft the guy in the 6th or 7th. It could be any number of names. And then we sign a UDFA of a decent dude, like make that guy a priority. If we took a guy in the 6th and a UDFA, it could be 2 random names in the hat. I would be happy with that running back room.
yeah, that's how I feel about it as well. So I mean, it's like on one hand, maybe with all these other issues that they have, they won't jump at a running back so early. But I think it comes back to this. It's about their perception. They are not the most self-objective franchise in the league. Like, when they look in the mirror, they see a Super Bowl contender, I think, right, every year. So I feel like there's a chance that they're going to go higher drafting a running back than we expect or maybe even want them to do, because it's an obvious need. There's a hole there. They have 2 guys that they like, but they don't really have a guy that they love. And he seems to want, Mike Tomlin in his career seems to really prefer to have a guy that he loves, that he will run the wheels off. So especially in this with Arthur Smith, you can't have just like 2 running backs that you kind of like with an Arthur Smith offense. I mean, that's like having 1 tight end that you really like, So yeah, I expect running back will get addressed. Corey, what do you think is what else is up in the needs department that we haven't talked about?
Ooh. I don't feel good at all about the receiver room. I
Mhm.
like DK. Don't get me wrong. I like DK. I like Pickens. I feel like there's still some stuff that probably needs to be sorted out in the locker room with that. But I think Calvin Austin has shown you what he is at this point, which is sometimes can give you a spark, but not a starter. I don't think we've seen that so far. Roman Wilson, I didn't like him coming out that much.
Mm-mm.
I don't know
None
what
of us like that pick.
I don't think they like him either anymore. But I would also say about this that it's just a misfit pick. I like things about him, but he's a guy that had plays manufactured for him in college and comes to an offense where, they barely do anything to get you open. So and then they barely, focus on a three wide receiver set where the field is spread and you get a two-way go against the slower defender in the middle of the field. Like this is not really what the Steelers do. They're not the Rams or Miami or Minnesota or now Chicago. So they're not doing a whole lot of that stuff, and it's more static offense. All of those things don't favor him. He was great. They got him in motion. He'd be great in the CFL because at Michigan they always had him like come in short motion so he could get started, and then he'd get a running start against some team's fourth cornerback or linebacker, a safety, and he would just run right by them across the field. And it's like he's very good at that. He's fast and he can make plays doing that. But yeah, it would totally not shock me, not just because we don't love the pick or we didn't love the pick, but it would totally not shock me if neither Roman Wilson nor George Pickens were on this roster come opening day. And we'll get to the Pickens thing in a second, but I just feel like Roman Wilson is, I'm not sure he's not somebody you look at in the depth chart and go, okay, well, we have that guy. We don't need to add at that position. He's someone that you're like, can we count on him to even show up? And we didn't like the way he dealt with last season as a rookie. And, it's like maybe he'll come in and show us that we were wrong about him, blah, blah, blah. But, with all of that said, I would say it's much more likely that if somebody offered them a pick for him, then they could use that pick to turn into something that they were more enamored with. It wouldn't surprise me. I was going to bring up the George Pickens thing. Yes, we're unhappy with the room, but to me, maybe the biggest issue with the DK Metcalf trade was not only that they traded a second rounder, but that they got a guy who was basically like the closest thing going to George Pickens. Like, do you want to have a wide receiver room where you have two of the same guys, and you're like George Pickens was already unhappy because he wasn't getting enough of the ball. He wasn't seeing the ball enough. And now you're going to split those deep balls down the sideline that the Steelers love to throw so much. You're going to split those touches now with DK Metcalf. I don't think George Pickens is going to end up being super happy. And you still don't really have a guy that like can, get open against coverage and always be open. So, the quarterback has a place to go to. I'll throw that to one of you guys, whoever wants to get into this question. It's like, would they be better off if they could just magically turn George Pickens into a wide receiver with a better attitude, who was going to be a better complement to DK Metcalf? Would they be wise to do that?
I'm gonna just real quick. I think that yes, it could work. I think Pickens has gotten savvy enough to use his body on other routes that aren't go balls to work as like a number one or number two. I feel like my thing with the number one and number two stuff is there a route you can't run? And I think Pickens can run any route. It wasn't like that his rookie year, but I think he's gotten to that point. Metcalf, he's gonna bully you off the line. He can give you your slants and he can give you your goes. And those are, you got to pick one, and it's going to be hard as hell to stop. But I think Pickens could fit with that. I think the whole thought on this is it really, not to discredit the conversation, it just doesn't matter until we get a quarterback, because none of the receivers are going to be happy if no one can get them the ball. And it doesn't matter if we have one, or we could have the most perfectly handcrafted receiving core. And if it's Jalen Milroe throwing them the ball as a rookie, we're probably not throwing for over 3,500 yards. Like, that's just the bottom line. So I do think it could work personally, chemistry wise, but I will acknowledge that until the quarterback thing gets even remotely sorted out, it really doesn't matter.
All right. Well, just the last word on that for me is the Steelers in a virtually unprecedented move. I can't remember them ever actually saying this publicly, but about a month ago they put out a statement that said, and I try to quote as closely as I can, if we would be open to, if George Pickens requests a trade, we will attempt to honor his request, unquote. Now, that is a hell of a statement to make. And maybe that was just them shutting him up, like we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe he's just been all over them and didn't like the DK Metcalf trade or whatever. And they were just like, look, if you want to go, you'll be gone, and they were just saying it out in public in a sort of, like sideways way. But that to me was a red flag. That makes it seem to me like they are actively seeking options in case he decides at some point he doesn't want to be there. And I feel like once the team starts looking for other options because you're not sure if you want to be there, they're not going to keep you for long if they can get a return. If they don't get the return, then they'll let it play up. I mean, this is the last year essentially of his deal. So you are going to be faced with an even bigger problem a year from now if you don't deal with this now. You either make him happy and want to be there forever, which would probably mean extending him at top dollar right now, which they're unlikely to do, having just signed DK Metcalf to a giant contract. But it's like if they're not going to sign him to a big money contract and make him happy, he's going to. I just feel like the chances are he's going to be unhappy and he's not going to want to come back on a reasonable contract next year and all of that. I just quickly, but I'll move on to this for you, Jeremy, which is, and you can finish on that if you want, but what wide receiver would you add to this group, and do you see them adding a wide receiver relatively early in this draft?
No, actually, that kind of feeds into what I was going to go with there. If Pickens is on this team, can be happy with his role, then I really think adding a dynamic slot wide receiver would be the way to go. Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, Calvin Austin plays in the slot, but Korey and you guys just said he's not someone that demands presence, when he's on the field. Like he's a good football player. No one's taking that away from him. And the past few times this past year, he was actually very opportunistic when Russell Wilson would throw him a deep ball. He actually came up with some great catches that, I was not expecting. So, but, if we're good on the outside with two very good, guys that are probably number one receivers in the league, I'd be more in tune to go with a slot wide receiver, someone, shifty, that route runner. I've kind of been on record before. Usually I like one outside receiver to be like my big physical down the field threat, and then my other really good receiver to be just this dynamic route runner, super quick type of guy, where you have Batman and Robin, and there are games where they flip those roles, where Robin takes over and Batman takes a seat or whatever. But if both Metcalf and Pickens are here, I'd love to get a dynamic slot guy that's just like really hard to stay with, but if Pickens is not here, if we do decide to trade him away, I don't mind the idea of going to get like another George Pickens big type of receiver, just, a guy that, the Steelers have, I don't know if they brought him in. Okay, yeah. So, I mean, they brought in Jaden Higgins. He's that big physical outside threat.
Matthew Golden was the other wide receiver that I know they brought in.
Yeah, so Savion Williams from TCU has brought in. He's that 6'3", very good with the ball. For a guy who has barely played wide receiver in his career in college, he does a lot of things that you can work with. But the other guy that's intriguing is, they brought in Jalen Noel from Iowa State. So it's not like they haven't looked at, a slot wide receiver. I'm scanning this list very quickly. Yeah, they brought in Matt Golden too. So and Jalen Noel. Oh, is that on here twice?
Yeah, maybe.
That's totally on here twice. But it's like they've looked at outside receivers and inside receivers. So it's kind of hard to know who they'd go with if Pickens is here, or even if he isn't here. but I'd be more inclined to go get that guy that can win on routes alone. Like he doesn't have to be like a 4-3 guy, but a guy that just leaves people just like grasping for air. When that guy runs around and gets in and out of his breaks, I'd be very much down for a guy like that.
I'll ask this just to pose the question.
Mhm.
How upset would you guys be if we took Luther Burden in the first round?
Very.
Yeah,
I think that's the absolutely wrong fit.
I don't hate it, but I don't love it. It's one of those guys where he's like, yeah, he's a super talented guy, but he's a bigger version of Calvin Austin at this point.
Yeah, great
Of
catch
what
and
he'd
run
bring
guy.
year one anyway.
But I mean, a great catch and run guy, but it's like you have to design an offense to feed a guy like that to make it worthwhile. Whereas if mostly what he's doing is blocking and getting the occasional look on third down, you're not doing as
Right.
much catch and run on third down, which is really his game. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
I know you're a Missouri fan, Corey. What do you think about this?
I do like Luther Burden. Like I said, there's basically nothing they can do that would really please me on the offseason just because of the quarterback situation. But if I closed my eyes and pretended like that wasn't a thing, I'm of the opinion of that we need a guy that can break tackles as a receiver. Now DK and Pickens can do that. Burden's a guy. Honestly, I'm just thinking from the point of view from if we're gonna have the kind of offense we have with Arthur Smith, to scrape as much value out of that as you can, you're going to need receivers who can make guys miss. You're going to need to get extra yards everywhere. You're going to need a good back. You're going to need receivers who break tackles and get you extra yards and manufacture big plays that the offense isn't manufacturing on their own. Like, we're not going to scheme up many big plays.
Yep.
It's going to have to come from the talent on the field. And that's why, from looking purely from if we're going to make this offense work and you signed Aaron Rodgers, I could see why that's going to work. I think he's better than he's as far as he's dropped. I didn't think he was ever a top 5 guy.
Yeah.
But that's just something where if they did the right things after that pick, I could start to see where there's a world where the offense starts to work if everything goes right.
Well, listen,
I mean, Burton is a modern day Percy Harvin. I mean, that's the player you're getting with Burton, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I feel like the squattiness kind of, you're getting what you hope to be Deebo Samuel, what you hope, which that's a high bar that you don't, even though he's fallen off the last year or so, you don't want to set that bar for anyone. But I don't know if we were going to pivot to another position. I think one of the concerning things, just as I'm looking at this, there are just so many spots on that defensive line or on that defense in general where, like, they're fine players, but like, I don't think we've ever had this many players top to bottom, offense and defense. We're like, oh yeah, they could be upgraded with a 2nd-round pick. And it's so many.
I threw out this theory. I developed this theory like 10 years ago, which is that the players you have that are good enough but not great are actually obstacles. They're obstacles because they're, your risk aversion, if you're risk averse as the Steelers are, you never want to get rid of that guy because it could get worse. It could be worse if we get rid of him. But, that basically stagnates you. You've got to put some new blood in there that improves you at positions where you were okay there, but you could improve that. And that to me is getting back to the philosophy thing. To me, if there was ever a draft to really be all about best player available and that whole mantra of, if you have doubts about which player to pick the bigger one, like this is that kind of a draft for me. I'm not trying to keep my coaching job, so maybe I'm not as motivated to have, whatever quarterback I can get right now and not worry about the hell with next year, all that business. But I do think that I'm just trying to like improve the team anywhere I can improve it with a player who's, potentially better, a prospect that's better. That's how I would approach this draft. And I think, as you said, Corey, it could be almost anywhere. Like the perfect example would be like I put in yellow here that kind of player, the player that can sort of, that could be upgraded. To me, Pat Fryermuth in an Arthur Smith offense, you could add, I mean, extreme example. If you added Tyler Warren instead of Pat Fryermuth, you just took Fryermuth out and put Tyler Warren in. Even if you don't love Tyler Warren, it's still a better offense, right? Like you can imagine Arthur Smith's offense working a lot better with an H-back who's more dynamic and blocks a little better. So to me, it's if you're going to be tight end centric, that wouldn't be the worst idea. I don't know that I need to spend a top pick on it because it's not an emergency. But because something's not an emergency doesn't mean you shouldn't attend to it. Or what order you pick in is less important than who you pick.
I would be really curious, just in general. They won't upgrade tight end, but just like a real seam stretcher like Arroyo I'd be curious to see how that type of player would expand the offense more, like one of those more natural receivers. Because
Donald Parham is a little bit that, I mean, it really was just that he had that really scary concussion that set him back. But other than that, he's actually kind of been that guy.
Another place, just looking at this too, they won't do it. And I love this guy when he was getting drafted, but like Patrick Queen, I feel like there's a lot of like third round linebacker types that would be notably better. That like if Patrick Queen wasn't, wearing number 6 for the Ravens or number 8 for the Ravens, whatever he was wearing, and an early pick, like if Patrick Queen was a 7th round pick from Western Michigan back in like 2017, there's no way he'd be starting for the Steelers right now. No way.
Yeah.
But I feel like his pedigree's carried him a long way into this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys. There's like 4 different backers in like that 100+ range where I think that's not a hard upgrade at all, but I don't think they'll do it.
I think it's a really good linebacker class. It's not. I don't usually say that, but it's an unusually good linebacker class. It's been lost because things like the running backs and the defensive tackles are so. The class is so good.
Well, and then I want to chime in here really quick because this is where my thought process went as soon as you guys said linebackers. You want to know what position they have not brought in at all for a pre-draft visit? That'd be linebacker and outside linebacker.
No, they did bring an outside linebacker in.
Who? This list I'm looking at does not have a single
Stewart.
edge or linebacker.
Shamar Stewart.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. He's listed as a D lineman, so that's why I didn't really put him in.
We were talking about the guy that blew up the combine, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that guy. He's that's fair. He is an edge player. I'll give you that.
Dupree. I mean, that's he's basically Bud Dupree.
Yeah.
I mean, for better or worse, like
I actually think he's like to a T, and I honestly I don't even know what we run anymore. If we're being like, that old like 5-4-I that we used to play a lot with, I feel like, and that's what people complained about him playing at Texas A&M. But there's a lot of value in those guys being big time disruptors to keep your edges clean. We basically just run a 4-2 now, so you figure out how to play end, and that's where Highsmith and Water playing. But I do think the right kind of shuffling around and right packages, he could be a very good player and a very good defense with especially if he's got edge rushers around him where you either got to deal with him. It's the same thing when they used to put Hayward in the 3 and Watt just off the you can't double both of them, so you're just going to take your lumps with one of them beating your ass. And I feel like Stewart could that kind of interior rusher.
Well, would you be shocked if he ended up with the Eagles? Because there's a team that can take interchangeable parts and guys that are just great athletes that are and just give them roles to do that they're good at and succeed with it. So we aspire to be that team. We always talk about try to draft like them and build your team like them, but if you don't have the coaching to go along with it and the mentality that the coaches have, then it's a different story, right? I was going to talk a little bit about the draft and what we're doing this weekend, but do you guys have any other obvious things aside from what we've talked about? I could go on all day. Well, what about if we don't pick a quarterback first? Do you think they might pick a quarterback in the mid or late rounds?
Well, I will give the Steelers front office credit on this one thing. We have checked out a shit ton of quarterbacks. Like if their position is quarterback in this draft class, we've essentially checked them out. Whether we've been to pro days, whether we brought them in on visits, like we have probably hit the top 10 quarterbacks easy. Like if they were a consensus top 10 guy at this point, like we've talked to them probably twice, whether it's visits, pro day.
Well, Jeremy, I was going to say maybe on the consensus board, but not on my board. I got a couple of quarterbacks that would be actually reasonably
sure, but
not for the
all
not
the
to
guys
be the Steelers' long-term starter, but for somebody that could play in this offense and be better than Mason Rudolph.
Sure, but like all the guys that like are
you're right.
Bigger names, like we have hit them. Like the Steelers have done their homework on quarterbacks. It's not like the Kenny Pickett year where there's legitimately only 4 quarterbacks to watch, and only 2 of them drafted, and type of year. Like it's a year where these guys have done well enough at the college level and have played highs and lows to where it's like, okay, we do need to do our homework on them to see if we think they can actually be the guy. So I'll give them credit there.
Did they see Will Howard?
I mean, they went to the Ohio State Pro Day, so
yeah. Oh, they did. Okay.
Yeah.
Because that was the one name I hadn't really heard them talk about that I thought was curious that they didn't see him, being that he's an Ohio State guy.
Will Howard is like everything that Mike Tomlin stands against. It's like I've said this for 2 years now because I actually liked him a lot at Kansas State.
Yeah.
Not as like a top 10 guy, but like I just liked him. No one was talking about him. It's like you get a lot of good quarterback play from him, and then you get like 2 of the most boneheaded, like, why in the world did you do that plays ever? And that just Mike Tomlin probably saw like 3 of those and was just like, we're not doing it. What you tell me? Hey, we're not taking risks.
I don't know. He saw you let Jalen Milroe throw the ball anywhere near the middle of the field. You're taking a bigger risk than drafting Will Howard. But that's another.
It's like Will Howard. It's like he just doesn't see a guy. It's not even like a risky throw. He just doesn't see a guy.
Yeah. With
Jalen Milroe, he sees what's going on. He's just ripping the ball 10 yards over his receiver's head. Yeah. And then you've got like, the Cam Ward type of throws where it's a risky throw and he knows what's going on, but he actually has the wherewithal to place it. That's what kind of separates the risk out in all of these.
Yeah, he has the arm to catch. He has the arm to catch the checks, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, all these quarterbacks we've talked about, if you look at a lot of like their just highlights and cut-ups, some of their most impressive throws are like the big throws, and it's like the windows are so much smaller in the NFL. And that's the biggest thing that college quarterbacks have to learn when they get to the NFL is that's no longer a viable throw at this level. And I don't know how many of those guys I've watched this year where I'd like, yeah, I'm really sure, other than like Cam Ward, because we've all been on the effusive Cam Ward train for like 3.5 years here. But like outside of Cam Ward, you don't see a whole lot of those throws. And especially because we were talking about Will Howard. When you have a Jeremiah Smith out there and you can just launch it and he's going to go get it. Yeah, it's great that you put the ball, in the vicinity of where it should be for Jeremiah Smith, who's going to could be the number 1 overall pick next year, type of wide receiver. That's great. But I'm more interested if you can thread the needle, and cover 2 when you've got to fit that throw in the middle of the field between the safeties over the linebacker or, that sideline throw where it's got to, go on and on, but it's like you just don't see that from these quarterbacks. They all have good throws here and there, and some of their great throws are throws that most college quarterbacks should make with the type of spacing you get in college football.
One thing and this is like this would be a real issue if it was ever brought up. But I would be curious to see what would happen to offense. A, in college, if you narrowed the hashes, but more interestingly, B, if you took the NFL hashes and panned them out a little.
Hmm.
It if you
Big
let's
difference.
just yeah, you did that, and then you let defensive guys be a little more physical in the first 5 yards because you got to give and take something, or else it's going to be 40 and 50 points every game.
Yeah.
It's like you do something to counteract it. I would just be curious to see how that would change offense and quarterback play really in the NFL.
I think it really affects it. And it's one of the reasons it's hard to judge. Just going back to what Jeremy said earlier, though, I said this when I developed this thought when I was watching Josh Rosen when he came out. You remember
Mhm.
that great, highly touted quarterback that busted. He was so actually. There's a guy that was so bad in year one that they drafted another quarterback in the top
Yeah.
five again the following year. So kudos
Mhm.
to the Arizona Cardinals for understanding the mistake and just going right back to the well. I'm sure that took guts to do. No, but you're watching a quarterback's prospects highlights. Uh, I think you can actually learn a lot by when their highlights involve things that they would never be able to get away with when they're in the pro game, or
Mhm.
when their throws over the middle don't have enough velocity, but it makes it because the guy's wide open. Like it's like the limitations in their highlights. What's not in the highlights is almost a good way to evaluate them, because it really is a question of, like, if they have the club in their bag, maybe they didn't need to exercise it a lot in college and they'll have to speed up their processing and improve their technique a little bit or whatever. But if they don't even have that club, then yeah, life is rough. You better be like
Yeah.
a Nussmeier or somebody that's so good at understanding the game that you can get away with not having elite tools.
I can't
Mhm.
stop thinking about Kenny Pickett's highlight tapes when you're saying that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like the one thing, like you think about that with like Justin Fields. Justin Fields had some like insane deep balls, insane like lasers to the sidelines. But like you go back and watch Justin Fields' college highlights, unless it was a post, which is like I don't know if you even consider a post the middle of the field kind of throw because you're really just launching that thing as far as you can up the center. Is like he had no passes in the middle of the field. Like that just wasn't a thing he did. So that's one of those ones where I mean you're exactly right. It's what isn't on there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas like the first 5 minutes of watching Patrick Mahomes was like, okay, like like
Yeah.
there
Oh
isn't a
shit.
throw,
Yeah.
there isn't a throw that he's afraid of, and there isn't a throw that he can't his arm can't actually back up the ego.
Right.
So it's like, man, you got supreme confidence and the arm to back it up. Then yeah, you're a Cameron Ward or you're a Ben Roethlisberger or those guys for a reason. Let's just a tease for tomorrow. So tomorrow, if you join us again on the Steeler Fury pre-draft extravaganza, we're going to do the equivalent of our war room that we've done in previous years, where we're going to go through all the prospects that we think are possibilities at each round and try to lay out our board that we'll use for this draft that we're doing. So we're doing a draft associated with draftprofessor.com. You might have known them before as NFL Fanatic. They changed their name for legal reasons because the cops were after them. But on their YouTube channel, Draft Professor, I've appeared a couple of times on some shows this year, talked about some small schoolers, hosted when they were doing some multi-round drafts with people texting in picks and whatever. But Jim's a good guy and has been Jim Wickens runs that site. Been a good guy. He's participated with us in our mock draft and in our drafted team, and he have even built a drafted team simulator into his site at draftprofessor.com. So if you get a chance, check it out, because if the person who came up with drafted team endorses the simulator, it's pretty good. It's getting there. Next year it's going to be 100% on point. So there's all that. There's a live draft event Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and we will be making our picks as if we were actually the Steelers with a board that we can believe in and whatever. So we'll get to that tomorrow. And here's the tease. Korey mentioned somebody in this show, and he mentioned the need for a player that can get the ball in their hands and break tackles as being crucial for the offense. And the name of that player was mentioned on this show tonight So tomorrow, if you tune in, you'll find out who I think that player is. Last thoughts from any of you guys before we wrap it for tonight. I'll start with you, Jeremy.
For the love of God, draft a good defensive lineman. I was just appalled by kind of the guys that we've assigned this offseason to replace the guys that we cut. That we have got to get a blue chipper there. Our defensive line has quietly been a joke ever since Stephon Tuitt, retired, and Javon Hargrave took off. Like, those are the two that once they left, it was just kind of downhill from there.
Are you not a big fan of Daniel Ukulele or Sezi Otomero?
I'm glad that you pronounce those names and not me. I mean, they're back into the roster type of guys, but the problem is we already have like 3 of those guys on the roster. Like, what you're looking at the depth chart that you put together, and I was like, there have never been this few of good names in the Steelers defensive line room since I've watched Steelers football. And I've been watching for, let's see, about 20 years now, 2 decades. Yeah, I've been watching since I was about 15.
Yeah.
Is when I really started, watching the Steelers. The first few years of Big Ben, those Super Bowls and all that. This team used to dominate the trenches. And the fact that we gave up a 300-yard game to Derrick Henry last year, and just how bad the defense has kind of devolved these past 2 years as far as, defending the run, it's kind of like taking a little bit of the heart and soul out of this team. It used to be this dominant, front seven, and it really hasn't been that for, 2 or 3 years now. I'd say 3 years ago was before Watt got hurt. That year was the last really good year Pittsburgh had a pretty good defense.
Yeah. That Isaiah Loudermilk is the young Cam Hayward. Korey, last words.
It's just until we get the quarterback, it's hard to be really. And Aaron Rodgers doesn't count, by the way. Until we get a under 25-year-old with talent, I'm not really. It just kind of is what it is. We might make some good picks, we might make some bad picks, but till we have that guy, it doesn't really matter. I'll take enjoyment in looking at the draft stuff, but that until that happens, I'm gonna have the same kind of thing every single year from here on out.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed. Well, I'm looking forward to tomorrow because, as powerless as we usually are about the Steelers, tomorrow and this weekend is our chance to, to feel like we have agency, that we're able to do something to make this team better. In the same draft, by the way, it's 2 years ago now with the George Pickens, right? Korey and I picked George Pickens at a time when people were like, "Oh my God, you're crazy to pick him as a first rounder," blah blah blah, and it turned out that he was available in the second round. But man, we tried to make that team better by not picking Kenny Pickett in the first round. But tomorrow's our chance to start building that champion that we always wanted to have. So anyway. I'm looking forward to enjoying that experience with you guys. Tune in. It's a must-see. You'll learn a lot about prospects and what we think about them that we've been keeping close to the vest as we do our mock drafts with each other. But tomorrow is the powers unite, and we will figure out the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers in an actual mock draft with 31 fairly savvy teams of GMs. So once again, for Steeler Fury, Jeremy Kohlman, for Korey Karbowsky, I'm your host, Wil Masisak, also known as Accidental Zen on Twitter, and Bradshaw to Ben. If you're on Steeler Fury, come visit. And we will see you tomorrow with another exciting edition of the pre-draft extravaganza as we do the Steelers War Room Part 1.